Hello, and welcome to the arcade. You know, I think when gamers look back at their gaming career, there's typically only a handful of standout franchises. For most people, when they find that thing that they really love, they tend to stick with it, even through the bad entries. Franchises can feel like family, or at least they can provide a level of familiarity and comfort that you could typically rely on to shape the trajectory of your future gaming purchases. But that being said, it is nearly impossible to keep up with every single great gaming franchise. And most of us only have a few that we would call our absolute favorites. And believe me, I have a long list of great gaming franchises that I've missed out on for one reason or another. Whether it's because I wasn't interested in the gameplay, the genre, or the aesthetic, there were a lot of franchises that just slipped right by me. And the older I get, the harder it feels to get back into a franchise that has already spanned decades of releases. But I'll always just have a little bit of regret hanging over my head for these few that I want to talk about today. So let's get to it. Here are the great gaming franchises that I missed out on. Number 1. Final Fantasy. The year was 1987 when a small Japanese game development company called Square, now known as Square Enix, took a gamble and released the first Final Fantasy game. Developed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, this last-ditch effort to save the company turned out to be a massive success. In the wake of this triumph, the name Final Fantasy would go on to become synonymous with excellence and innovation in the gaming industry. As one of the pioneers of role-playing game franchises, Final Fantasy helped shape the entire RPG genre. Before its arrival, RPGs were niche and relatively unknown outside of Japan. With its rich storytelling, captivating characters, and imaginative world-building, Final Fantasy brought RPGs to the forefront of gaming culture, captivating players worldwide. Beyond just gameplay mechanics, Final Fantasy's most enduring legacy lies in its storytelling. From the epic struggle of good versus evil to deeply emotional character arcs, Final Fantasy games have woven intricate narratives that tug at the heartstrings of millions of players. The exploration of complex themes, well-developed characters, and surprising plot twists have raised the bar for storytelling in video games, making players emotionally invested in the virtual worlds created by Square. But the innovation didn't stop with storytelling. Final Fantasy has been a driving force behind many gameplay mechanics that are now staples of modern RPGs. The active time battle system introduced in Final Fantasy IV brought a dynamic and strategic element to combat. The iconic job system allowed players to customize their characters' abilities, offering an unparalleled sense of freedom and replayability. Each new installment of the franchise built upon the successes of its predecessors, pushing the boundaries of gaming mechanics. Now, let's talk about some of the most influential and beloved titles in the Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy VII, hailed by many as a masterpiece, introduced players to iconic characters like Cloud, Tifa, and Sephiroth. Its emotional depth and groundbreaking 3D graphics set new standards for RPGs. Final Fantasy X took players on an awe-inspiring journey with Tidus and Yuna, weaving a poignant tale of love, sacrifice, and destiny. The game's sphere grid and breathtaking visuals garnered praise from critics and fans alike. And how can we forget Final Fantasy XIV? This MMORPG epic rose from its initial struggles to become one of the greatest comeback stories in gaming history. Its ever-expanding world, engaging gameplay, and continuous updates have kept millions of players invested for years. These titles were not only critical successes, but also commercial triumphs, breaking records and becoming fan favorites. They proved that video games could be much more than just entertainment. They could be art. Final Fantasy VII Remake, released years later, became a testament to the series' enduring legacy, captivating both old and new fans, and showcasing the impact Final Fantasy has had on the gaming industry. I was born in 1992, so obviously I wasn't around for the inception of Final Fantasy. It wasn't until about 2006 when my brother borrowed a copy of Final Fantasy X from a friend that I even got to see an entry from the series firsthand. And while the presentation, the graphics, and the music all seemed excellent, I just didn't think I could jump into a series as late as the 10th entry. Looking back now, that just seems silly, considering that many of the Final Fantasy stories take place independently of each other. But I didn't know that at the time, and I also wasn't much into turn-based battles either, so unfortunately I skipped the series and haven't really played any other entries in the main series since. However, I did and do still play Crystal Defenders on PSP and Dissidia Final Fantasy on PSP as well, if that counts. I have spent a lot of time listening to the incredible soundtracks of these games. Midnight Rendezvous, Besaid Island, and the main theme from Dissidia make me wish I had experienced these games as a kid when I had all the free time in the world to play video games. Final Fantasy remains a remarkable gaming franchise with a rich history and a devoted fan base. Despite missing out on playing these games, I can't help but admire the impact they've had on the gaming world and the joy that they've brought to countless players. Number 2. Resident Evil. Before we jump into the terrifying titles that made this franchise legendary, let's rewind to 1996 when Capcom unleashed the horror masterpiece that started it all, Resident Evil. Created by Capcom, this game introduced players to the eerie Spencer Mansion and a sinister viral outbreak, setting the stage for a new era of survival horror in gaming. With its groundbreaking use of pre-rendered backgrounds and spine-tingling atmosphere, Resident Evil became an instant hit, captivating gamers with its suspenseful storytelling and challenging gameplay. Now let's talk about the tremendous impact Resident Evil had on the gaming industry. It wasn't just about scaring players. It laid the foundation for the survival horror genre we know and love today. Resident Evil's success paved the way for numerous sequels and spin-offs, but more importantly, it inspired countless horror games that followed. From Silent Hill to Dead Space, its influence can be seen across the entire gaming landscape. With a franchise as vast as Resident Evil, there are several titles that truly stand out and continue to be celebrated by fans worldwide. Let's take a look at some of the pivotal titles that shaped the series. Resident Evil 2, released in 1998, took the terror to new heights. With its dual character perspective, innovative puzzles, and terrifying encounters with iconic creatures like the Tyrant, it remains one of the most beloved games in the franchise. The game received critical acclaim for its improved gameplay mechanics and continued to solidify Resident Evil's position as a genre-defining series. Fast forward to 2005 and we encountered a groundbreaking installment, Resident Evil 4. This game revolutionized the series with its over-the-shoulder camera view and intense action-packed gameplay. Resident Evil 4 not only garnered massive commercial success, but also received universal acclaim, cementing its status as one of the greatest video games ever made. And then in 2017, Capcom took a bold step by bringing the series back to its horror roots with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. This first-person experience immersed players in a chilling narrative and introduced a fresh perspective to the franchise. With a focus on psychological horror and survival, Resident Evil 7 reinvigorated the franchise, earning praise from fans and critics alike. My first chance to play the Resident Evil series came when my brother and I rented RE4 for a sleepover with our best friend one Friday. Admittedly, I was too scared to try it, and I just watched my brother play for most of the time that we had the game. Years later, after RE4 had been remastered for PS4, my brother lent me his copy. I played it for about 15 minutes and then had to put it down for some reason and just never came back to it. I really regret not continuing my playthrough of RE4, especially seeing how well received the RE4 remake has been. It's such a big part of gaming history that I feel like at some point I will have to sit down and at least play the original Resident Evil game. Of course, I had a lot of other great games that I was playing at the time, but Resident Evil stands as a gaming franchise that has profoundly impacted the horror genre and left an enduring mark on the gaming world. And though I missed out on playing these games, I can't deny the incredible influence they've had on horror gaming and their dedicated fanbase. Number 3. God of War. The God of War franchise, created in 2005, hails from the creative minds at Santa Monica Studio and was published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. From its inception, this series set out to change the gaming landscape and did so in spectacular fashion. This franchise took the gaming world by storm, revolutionizing the action-adventure genre with its intense gameplay and gripping storytelling. But it didn't stop there. God of War went on to redefine combat mechanics and set the bar sky high for future titles to follow. Critics and gamers alike shower the franchise with praise for its jaw-dropping set pieces, character development, and innovative combat system. The epic scale of the game's set pieces left players awestruck, immersing them in a world of gods and monsters like never before. The emotional depth of the characters, especially Kratos, kept players invested in the story's twists and turns. The combat system was designed to be fluid, brutal, and super satisfying. Many players still cite those first couple of entries in the series as some of the best combat controls and mechanics of all time. And as we look back at the history of God of War, we gotta mention some of the key titles that left their mark on gamers' hearts and on the gaming industry. It all started in 2005 with the first installment of God of War. The game introduced us to Kratos, a mortal seeking vengeance against the gods of Olympus. Its sequel, God of War 2, propelled the franchise even further with grander battles and a captivating storyline. But the series reached new heights with the release of the critically acclaimed 2018 installment of God of War. This marked a rebirth for the franchise, delving into Norse mythology and delivering a fresh take on Kratos' story as a father figure to his son Atreus. The 2018 title not only captivated longtime fans, but also welcomed a new generation of gamers into its mythic embrace. I honestly feel like I have no real excuse for missing out on the God of War franchise. My brother was pretty much obsessed with the games right from the beginning, and we had both of the first two entries. I feel like maybe it was because I was always watching him play through the games that I felt like I experienced enough of it that I never really needed to play it for myself. Looking back now, that seems silly, but hey, sometimes when you're a kid, you think silly things. Even having not played any of the God of War games, I'm still impressed by their presentation and the profound impact they've had on the action-adventure genre. And even though I missed out on playing these games, I can't help but be fascinated by the rich storytelling and breathtaking action they offer. Number 4. Metal Gear. The original Metal Gear released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987. Hideo Kojima's vision of stealth gameplay challenged the conventions of traditional action games that were popular at the time. In Metal Gear, players assumed the role of Solid Snake, a highly skilled operative on a mission to infiltrate enemy bases and sabotage the infamous Metal Gear weapon. The success of Metal Gear laid the groundwork for an innovative gaming experience, mixing stealth, strategy, and narrative in a unique way. It was one of the first games to emphasize non-violent approaches, offering players the option to avoid direct confrontations and instead choose stealth tactics. Metal Gear Solid was the game that took the franchise to new heights. Released in 1998 for the PlayStation, it introduced 3D graphics, full voice acting, and cinematic storytelling. The player once again took control of Solid Snake in a gripping narrative that blurred the lines between good and evil. This game revolutionized the stealth action genre, setting new standards for storytelling and character development in video games. Its intricate plot, memorable characters like Colonel Campbell, Otacon, and of course the enigmatic villain Liquid Snake are still celebrated by fans worldwide. The Metal Gear franchise continued to evolve with critical and commercial success, leading to some iconic titles. One of the most iconic is Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty, released in 2001. Sons of Liberty took risks and challenged players with a meta-narrative that explored themes of information control and identity. Although divisive upon release, its daring approach and memorable moments have cemented it as a significant entry in the series. In 2004, Metal Gear Solid 3: Snake Eater took players back in time, portraying the legendary mission of Big Boss during the Cold War. This prequel delved deep into the emotional and psychological aspects of the character, elevating the storytelling even further. The Metal Gear franchise has had a profound impact on gaming culture, inspiring countless developers and shaping the stealth action genre. It showed that video games could deliver compelling narratives, cinematic experiences, and tackle complex themes. Even beyond gaming, the Metal Gear series has expanded its reach into other forms of media, including comic books, novels, and even a Hollywood movie adaptation in the works. I hate to admit this, but as a kid, I always thought that the Metal Gear Solid games just seemed a little too weird. They had a blend of seriousness and lightheartedness that just seemed off to me. I do remember renting Metal Gear Solid 3 once and just watching my brother play. And I actually owned the original Metal Gear for the NES for a while there. I just never really gave this series a fair shot. Stealth also wasn't and still isn't really my cup of tea, but I still think that the Metal Gear series seems like it may have done it the best. Metal Gear stands tall as a gaming franchise that has left an indelible mark on the stealth action genre and the gaming world as a whole. Despite missing out on playing these games, I can't help but be captivated by the gripping narratives and gameplay innovations they introduced. And maybe with the upcoming Metal Gear collection, I'll finally get around to giving these games a try. Number 5. Diablo. In 1996, Blizzard Entertainment unleashed Diablo upon the gaming world. Drawing inspiration from roguelike games, the developers set out to create a dark and immersive action RPG experience. Diablo's gripping storyline and innovative gameplay captivated players and set new standards for the genre. Not only did Diablo pioneer the action RPG genre, but it also introduced gamers to loot-driven gameplay mechanics. The thrill of discovering rare and powerful items became addictive, and the randomization of item drops kept players exploring the depths of Tristram's haunted cathedral over and over again. Another aspect that set Diablo apart was its cooperative multiplayer feature. Friends could band together to explore the depths of hell, fight monstrous creatures, and challenge powerful demons as a team. This cooperative experience created lasting memories for players and brought a social element to the game that further enriched the overall experience. Diablo 2, released in the year 2000, is often regarded as the pinnacle of the series. With an expanded world, 5 unique character classes, and a wealth of new items and spells, Diablo 2 refined the formula introduced in the original game. The online multiplayer aspect flourished, allowing players to trade items and team up with friends, solidifying Diablo 2's status as a classic in the gaming community. And after much anticipation, Diablo 3 hit the shelves in 2012. This installment brought the franchise into the modern age with updated graphics, dynamic environments, and enhanced gameplay. Despite some initial controversy surrounding its always-online requirement, Diablo 3 eventually won over players with its compelling gameplay and numerous updates. The Diablo series not only influenced the action RPG genre, but also paved the way for other loot-driven games as well. Many developers drew inspiration from the loot mechanics and cooperative multiplayer features, leading to a new era of gaming experiences. While Diablo 2 was a bit before my time, I did actually buy and play Diablo 3 on launch day. I just didn't stick with it for any significant amount of time. And my experience with Diablo 3 didn't give me any desire to go back and try Diablo 1 and 2 or pick up Diablo 4. I'm definitely intrigued by the world and the lore of Diablo, but I just don't find myself that much a fan of the genre of these games. That said, Diablo remains an extraordinary gaming franchise that has significantly shaped the action RPG genre and captivated gamers worldwide. Although I missed out on getting into this series in any meaningful way, I can't deny my fascination with the rich lore and addictive gameplay that Diablo offers. So there you have it, my confession. I haven't really played any of the great entries from Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, Metal Gear, God of War, or Diablo. And for the most part, I really do regret that. Especially when I see things like God of War Ragnarok being a Game of the Year nominee and the upcoming Metal Gear collection for the Switch. I sadly just feel like I have no connection to these games, outside of listening to the soundtracks and maybe watching a gameplay video or a lore video now and then. And sometimes that really bums me out. Of course, there are still tons of franchises that I did get into and still love to this day, but sometimes it's kind of bittersweet to look back at your gaming career and look at all those franchises that passed you by for one reason or another, and think about what could have been. But what about you? Did you miss out on any of the great gaming franchises that I talked about, or any other ones that I didn't mention? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and thanks so much for watching.